plasma cannon discharged with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. Admiral Korven watched through the reinforced viewing portal as the blue-white beam carved through the atmosphere of another world, leaving nothing but molten glass where a city had stood moments before. The heat signature on his instruments showed that 3 million lives had just been extinguished in less than 10 seconds. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "Target eliminated, sir," reported his tactical officer, the words carrying no emotion. After 40 years of conquest, death had become nothing more than numbers on a screen. Korven nodded slowly, his 6 eyes scanning the planetary surface below. This world had been inhabited by a species called the Thraxians, bipedal creatures with primitive technology and a foolish belief that their stone fortresses could protect them from the might of the Hegemony. They had been wrong, just like the hundreds of other species that had fallen before the advancing fleets of the Galactic Dominion. The bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Conquest hummed with quiet efficiency. Crew members moved between their stations with practiced precision, monitoring the systematic destruction of yet another civilization. The ship itself was a monument to the Hegemony's power, 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack moons, and protected by energy shields that had never been breached in 3 decades of warfare. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Vex from her station, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining population centers. They're offering complete capitulation." "Too late," Korven replied without hesitation. "The Thraxians fired upon our scout ships. The penalty for resistance is extinction. Continue the bombardment." As more plasma bolts rained down upon the dying world, Korven reflected on how far the Hegemony had come. 50 years ago, they had been just another aggressive species among thousands in the galaxy. Now they ruled over 800 star systems, commanded fleets that numbered in the millions of ships, and had reduced entire civilizations to scattered refugees hiding in the dark spaces between stars. The formula was always the same. The Hegemony would arrive at a system with overwhelming force, usually 100 times more ships than any local defense could muster. They would demand immediate surrender and complete subjugation. Species that complied quickly were allowed to continue existing as slave races, mining resources and building ships for their new masters. Those that resisted even symbolically were eliminated entirely. It was efficient, it was absolute, and it had never failed. "Sir," reported the sensor operator, "planetary defense grid is completely offline. No remaining military assets detected. Population centers are at 12% of original levels and dropping." Korven walked to the central command platform, his heavy boots echoing in the vast chamber. Around him, holographic displays showed the progress of the fleet's work. 7 other dreadnoughts were systematically reducing the planet to ash, their weapons carving geometric patterns of destruction across continents. In orbit, thousands of smaller vessels waited to begin the resource extraction process once the cleansing was complete. The Admiral remembered when this had required effort. In the early days of expansion, some species had actually managed to damage Hegemony ships before being overwhelmed. The Thraxians had developed quantum torpedoes that could penetrate their shields. The Nexari had created swarm fighters that moved too quickly for standard targeting systems. The Vorthan Empire had even destroyed 3 dreadnoughts before falling, but those days were long past. The Hegemony had learned from every encounter, adapted to every tactic, and incorporated the best technologies of conquered species into their own arsenal. They had become unstoppable not through innovation, but through absorption. Every defeat had made them stronger, every victory had taught them new ways to destroy. "Admiral Korven," a new voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see his second-in-command, General Thorn, approaching with a data tablet in his clawed hands. Thorn was a veteran of 60 campaigns, his scarred exoskeleton bearing the marks of battles fought on 100 different worlds. "What is it, General?" "Sir, we've received new orders from Supreme Command. They want us to accelerate the expansion timeline." Feven took the tablet and studied the encoded message. The Hegemony's ruling council was growing impatient. They had projected that complete galactic domination would take another century at current rates. But the discovery of vast resource deposits in previously unexplored sectors had changed their calculations. They wanted the entire galaxy conquered within 50 years. "Ambitious," Korven mused, What's driving this urgency? Thorn gestured toward the tactical display, where thousands of red dots marked hegemony fleets spread across known space. Intelligence reports suggest there might be other powers beyond our current sphere of influence. Species or alliances we haven't encountered yet. The Council wants to consolidate control before we run into anything that might actually challenge us. The idea of a real challenge was almost amusing to Korven. In his 4 decades of service, he had seen species that could manipulate gravity, harness the power of stars, and even tear holes in space-time itself. All of them had fallen to superior numbers and ruthless strategy. The hegemony didn't need to be more advanced than their enemies. They just needed to be more committed to total warfare. How many systems are we talking about? Korven asked. Approximately 12,000 inhabited systems in the target expansion zones. Most are single-species civilizations with limited technology. But there are a few multi-system alliances that might require special attention. Korven nodded, already calculating the logistics. Each system would require at least 50 ships to ensure rapid conquest. Larger alliances might need full battle groups of 500 vessels or more. It would strain their manufacturing capacity, but the Hegemony had never been afraid of massive mobilization. Have the fleet commanders been briefed? All senior officers will receive their new assignments within the hour. Admiral Krex is being tasked with the Outer Rim expansion. Admiral Voss will handle the core ward sectors. And you, sir, have been assigned to investigate a region called the Local Group. Thorn highlighted a section of the star map that showed dozens of yellow systems clustered around a modest spiral galaxy. Most appeared to harbor primitive civilizations, if any life at all. It looked like easy conquest, the kind of assignment given to commanders who needed to rebuild their fleet strength after heavy fighting. Looks quiet, Korven observed. Intelligence agrees. Long-range scans indicate mostly low-technology civilizations. A few seem to have developed basic spaceflight, but nothing approaching our capabilities. The Council estimates complete pacification of the region within 6 months. As they spoke, the bombardment of the Thraxian homeworld reached its final phase. The planet's atmosphere was beginning to burn away, and the surface had become a glowing hell of molten rock and ash. Soon there would be nothing left but a barren sphere of cooling metal, ready to be strip-mined for resources. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. New orders are coming in." "Put it through," Korven commanded. The central display shifted to show Grand Admiral Zirion, Supreme Commander of all Hegemony forces. The ancient being's multiple eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence as he spoke from his flagship somewhere in the galactic core. "Admiral Korven, you are hereby ordered to proceed immediately to the Local Group sector for reconnaissance and preliminary conquest operations. You will take Battle Group 7, 200 ships, including your dreadnought. Your mission is to survey and pacify all inhabited systems in the designated zone." Korven straightened to attention. "Understood, Grand Admiral. What is our timeline?" 3 months for complete reconnaissance. 6 months for total conquest. The region appears to contain several hundred inhabited worlds, but none with significant military capability. This should be a routine expansion operation. The transmission continued with detailed operational parameters, resource allocation requirements, and strategic priorities. As Korven listened, he felt the familiar satisfaction of receiving a new assignment. After the grinding work of exterminating the Thraxians, the prospect of discovering and conquering new species was almost refreshing. When the briefing ended, Korven turned back to General Thorn. "Begin fleet reorganization immediately. I want us ready to depart within 12 hours. "Yes, sir." "Shall I maintain current operational protocols?" "Standard expansion procedures," Korven confirmed. "Full force deployment, demand immediate surrender, eliminate resistance. No exceptions." As the crew began preparations for departure, Korven took one last look at the dying Thraxian world. The planet was now completely dark, except for the glow of cooling lava flows. Another species had been removed from the galaxy, another potential threat eliminated before it could grow strong enough to matter. This was the Hegemony way. They didn't negotiate, they didn't compromise, they didn't show mercy. They arrived with overwhelming force and offered a simple choice: submit or die. It had worked on 800 star systems. It would work on 800 more. The fleet began its departure sequence, massive engines coming online with thunderous roars that echoed through the ship's hull. Escort vessels fell into formation around the dreadnought, their sleek hulls bristling with weapons. Support ships carrying troops, supplies, and construction equipment followed behind in precise formations. As they entered hyperspace, Korven studied the intelligence reports on their destination. The local group contained one particularly interesting target, a small yellow star with several rocky planets. Initial scans suggested at least one world might harbor life, though the readings were inconclusive. The planet appeared to have liquid water and a breathable atmosphere, but no obvious signs of advanced civilization. It would make an excellent forward base once they cleared out whatever primitive life forms had evolved there. 3 weeks later, the Hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system. The star was unremarkable, a middle-aged yellow dwarf surrounded by 8 planets and various debris. Korven stood on his bridge, watching as the sensor arrays began their detailed scans. "Report," he commanded. "Sir, we're detecting multiple planets in the habitable zone. The third planet from the star shows clear signs of life. Oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, complex weather patterns. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. The sensor operator paused, looking confused. "Sir, the readings are strange. Elaborate. The planet appears to be completely dead, sir. No electromagnetic signatures. No thermal patterns consistent with civilization. No artificial satellites or structures. But the biosphere is incredibly active. It's almost like the planet is teeming with life, but completely uninhabited by intelligent species." Korven frowned. This was unusual. Most life-bearing worlds either had no intelligent species at all, or had civilizations that were clearly detectable from space. A planet with abundant life but no signs of intelligence was rare but not unprecedented. "Any other worlds of interest in the system?" "Negative, sir. The fourth planet shows signs of ancient water activity, but appears dead now. The second planet is a toxic hellscape. This system appears to contain only one potentially valuable world." "Tactical assessment?" General Thorne consulted his displays. "If the planet is indeed uninhabited, we can move directly to colonization phase. No resistance expected. We could have mining operations established within weeks." It seemed almost too easy. Korven had been expecting at least some minor civilization to require elimination. A completely empty but habitable world was like finding a treasure chest sitting unguarded in space. "Move the fleet into close orbit," he ordered. "Deploy full sensor arrays and reconnaissance drones. I want detailed scans of every continent before we commit to landing operations." As the massive Hegemony fleet approached the blue-green world, their instruments began collecting vast amounts of data. The planet was indeed remarkable. Diverse ecosystems, abundant water, rich mineral deposits, and a stable climate. It would make an excellent addition to the Hegemony's collection of conquered worlds. "Sir," reported the science officer, "we're detecting some unusual readings from the planet's surface. There are structures that appear artificial, but they're not registering as active technology." "Show me." The main display filled with images of the planet's surface taken by high-resolution cameras. Korven could see vast networks of straight lines crisscrossing the continents, too regular to be natural formations but showing no signs of current use. There were also geometric shapes scattered across the landscape, some quite large, but all appeared to be inactive. "Ruins," General Thorne observed. "This world was inhabited once, but the civilization appears to be extinct." "How long extinct?" Korven asked. The science officer ran calculations on his console. "Based on the decay patterns and geological evidence, I'd estimate the structures are very recent, perhaps only decades or centuries old. Whatever happened here occurred quite recently in geological terms. This was even better than an uninhabited world. A recently extinct civilization meant there might be useful technology or resources left behind, but no living inhabitants to resist colonization. It was like discovering a warehouse full of supplies that had been abandoned by its previous owners." "Any indication of what caused the extinction?" "Negative, sir. No signs of warfare, no radiation signatures, no evidence of plague or natural disaster. The civilization appears to have simply stopped. Korven considered this mystery but decided it didn't affect their mission. Whatever had happened to the planet's previous inhabitants was irrelevant. What mattered was that the world was now available for hegemony use. "Prepare landing forces," he commanded. "I want full geological surveys, resource assessments, and archaeological analysis of those ruins. If there's useful technology down there, I want it recovered." "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Fleet Command. Priority 1. The display shifted to show Grand Admiral Zirion once again, but this time the ancient commander looked troubled. "Admiral Korven, we have received intelligence that concerns your current mission. Our long-range scouts have detected unusual activity in sectors adjacent to your target zone." "What kind of activity, Grand Admiral?" "Unidentified ships moving through hyperspace. Large formations traveling at high speed toward unknown destinations. We have been unable to intercept or identify these vessels, and they do not match any known civilization in our databases." Korven felt a slight chill. In 50 years of expansion, the Hegemony had cataloged thousands of different ship designs and propulsion systems. For their scouts to encounter completely unknown vessels was unprecedented. "Do we know if these ships are connected to the local group region?" "Unknown. But their trajectory suggests they may be operating in or near your area of operations. You are to proceed with extreme caution. If you encounter any unidentified vessels, you are to report immediately before taking any action." The transmission ended, leaving Korven with an uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty. The Hegemony's success had always been based on superior intelligence and overwhelming force. Operating in a region where unknown powers might be active violated both principles. But his orders were clear: survey and pacify the region, starting with the apparently dead world below them. "General Thorn," he said, "double the landing force, and bring the entire fleet into close defensive positions around the planet. I want to be ready for anything." "Understood, sir. Shall I delay the landing operation?" "Number, we proceed as planned, but maintain full alert status." As the Hegemony fleet took up positions around the mysterious blue world, none of them noticed the very faint electromagnetic signatures emanating from the planet's surface. Their sensors, designed to detect the massive energy outputs of advanced civilizations, completely overlooked the subtle whispers of a different kind of technology. Billions of small devices creating a barely detectable web of communication across the planet's surface. The world appeared dead to them because they were looking for the wrong signs of life. They expected to see the blazing signatures of fusion reactors and antimatter engines, the thermal blooms of industrial complexes, the geometric patterns of vast cities. They had no concept of a civilization that had learned to hide in plain sight, that had mastered the art of appearing primitive while possessing capabilities beyond their imagination. Admiral Korven stood on his bridge, studying the peaceful blue world below, completely unaware that billions of eyes were watching his fleet from the surface. The inhabitants of this world had been monitoring space for radio signals and electromagnetic emissions for decades. They had detected the Hegemony's approach from light years away, and had been preparing for this moment. The landing force deployed from the Hegemony fleet consisted of 50,000 troops in heavily armored assault craft. They were equipped with energy weapons that could level mountains, personal shields that could deflect missile strikes, and surveillance equipment that could track a mouse from orbit. They were the most advanced military force in known space, veterans of hundreds of successful invasions. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, their instruments confirmed what the orbital scans had suggested. The world was rich with life but showed no signs of active civilization. The ruins they had detected from space were indeed abandoned, overgrown with vegetation and clearly unused for decades. Colonel Drax, commanding the landing force, established the primary base camp in a large, cleared area that seemed ideal for their purposes. Within hours, they had deployed defensive barriers, communication arrays, and resource extraction equipment. Everything proceeded exactly according to standard invasion protocols. "This is almost boring," Drax reported to Admiral Korven. "No resistance, no indigenous life forms larger than small mammals, no hazardous materials or hostile environment. It's like conquering an empty park." "Maintain vigilance," Korven replied. "Complete your surveys and prepare for full colonization operations. What neither the landing force nor the orbital fleet realized was that their every move was being observed and analyzed by a global network of hidden sensors. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in facilities that generated no electromagnetic signatures and produced no thermal outputs, billions of inhabitants watched the invaders with growing concern. The beings living on this world had learned the hard way that space was full of predators. They had been monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy for 50 years, listening to the death screams of civilizations being exterminated by various aggressive species. They had heard the final transmissions from worlds being strip-mined, planets being sterilized, entire star systems being claimed by conquering fleets. So they had made a choice. They had hidden. Every major city had been moved underground, powered by geothermal energy that left no surface signature. Industrial facilities had been buried beneath miles of rock. Communication networks used quantum entanglement instead of radio waves. Transportation systems moved through underground tunnels instead of visible roads or airways. To any external observer, the planet appeared to be inhabited only by wildlife and the ruins of some long-dead civilization. It was a deception that had taken decades to complete and required the cooperation of 8 billion inhabitants. But now that deception was being tested by the most dangerous force they had ever encountered. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the Global Defense Command Center, 2 miles beneath what the surface dwellers had once called New York City. Around her, hundreds of technicians monitored the activities of the alien fleet through a vast network of concealed sensors. Every Hegemony ship was being tracked, every communication intercepted, every tactical movement analyzed. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, "the alien ground forces have established their base camp approximately 50 kilometers from entry point 7. They appear to be conducting standard geological surveys." Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display that showed the positions of 50,000 alien soldiers on the surface. Each red dot represented an enemy that could probably kill 100 humans in direct combat. Their weapons and armor were centuries ahead of anything in Earth's conventional military arsenal. But Earth's conventional military had never been designed to fight aliens. It had been designed to fight other humans. What they had built for alien invasion was something entirely different. "Status report on global readiness," Sarah requested. "All continental defense grids are at full activation," reported General Martinez from his position at the Strategic Command Console. "Underground cities are sealed and running on internal resources. Surface camouflage systems are maintaining the illusion of abandonment. The aliens have no indication that 8 billion people are living beneath their feet." "What about the fleet in orbit?" 212 vessels, all heavily armed. "Our analysis suggests they carry enough firepower to sterilize the entire surface of the planet several times over. However," Martinez paused, consulting his data. "However, they're also following predictable patterns based on what we've observed from their previous conquests." Sarah had spent 5 years studying intercepted communications from across the galaxy, building a comprehensive profile of the Hegemony's military doctrine. They were incredibly powerful, but also incredibly arrogant. They had never encountered serious resistance, so they had become careless. They expected quick surrender or easy extermination. They had never tried to conquer a planet where the entire population was hidden and prepared for guerrilla warfare on a global scale. "Dr. Chen," interrupted Dr. Patel from the xenobiology section, "we've completed our analysis of the alien physiology based on visual scans. They appear to be silicon-based life forms with distributed nervous systems. Our biological weapons should be effective, but we'll need to modify the delivery mechanisms." "How long for modification?" 72 hours if we rush production." Sarah considered this timeline. The alien ground forces were clearly planning to establish a permanent base before calling in colonization ships. That gave Earth a limited window to act before the invasion became unstoppable. "Begin modification immediately. What about the kinetic options?" General Martinez activated a new display showing hidden installations across the planet's surface. "All railgun batteries are in position and powered. We've got 200 concealed artillery sites that can engage the orbiting fleet simultaneously. Each site is designed to fire once before relocating to backup positions. Effectiveness against their shields? Unknown," Martinez admitted. "But our projectiles are moving at significant fractions of light speed. Even advanced shielding has limitations." The plan they had developed was born from desperation and creativity in equal measure. When humanity had first detected evidence of hostile aliens in the galaxy, they had faced an impossible choice. They could build massive visible defenses that would invite preemptive attack, or they could hide and hope to be overlooked. Instead, they had chosen a third option. They had made their entire civilization disappear while building the most sophisticated planetary defense system in the galaxy. Every mountain, every forest, every abandoned city on the surface concealed weapons that could strike targets in orbit. The planet itself had become a weapon, but it would only work if they achieved complete surprise. If the Hegemony detected the hidden infrastructure before the attack began, Earth would face orbital bombardment that could crack continents. "Dr. Chen," called out the communications officer, "we're intercepting increased chatter between the alien ground forces and their fleet. They appear to be requesting additional survey equipment." "What kind of equipment?" "Deep penetration scanners, designed to analyze subsurface geology to depths of several kilometers." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. Deep scans would eventually detect the hidden cities and installations that honeycombed the planet's crust. If the aliens discovered that Earth was inhabited, they would immediately begin orbital bombardment to flesh out the hidden population. How long before they deploy the deep scanners? Based on their communication patterns, we estimate 48 hours before the equipment arrives from their fleet. Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of the people who had spent 10 years preparing for this moment. They had always known that eventually humanity would be discovered. They had hoped to have more time to prepare, but the universe rarely accommodated human schedules. "Send the alert to all Continental commands," she ordered. "Operation Rising Dawn is now active. We have 48 hours to eliminate the alien fleet before they discover our cities." Across the planet, hidden bases received the transmission that they had drilled for countless times but never expected to actually receive. 8 billion people who had lived in secret for decades were about to reveal themselves in the most dramatic way possible. On the surface, Colonel Drax continued his surveys, completely unaware that beneath his feet lay the largest military-industrial complex in Earth's history. His troops walked over concealed missile silos, camped next to disguised rail gun positions, and collected soil samples from areas that served as emergency exits for underground cities housing millions of people. The Hegemony had conquered 800 star systems by following the same pattern: arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, crush resistance, extract resources. They had never encountered a species that turned their entire planet into a trap. As the alien fleet maintained its orbit, confident in their superiority and convinced they faced no opposition, the hidden defenders of Earth made their final preparations. In 46 hours, when the aliens deployed their deep scanning equipment, they would discover that the planet they thought was empty actually contained 8 billion humans who had been watching them since the moment they arrived. But by then, it would be too late for the Hegemony to escape. The trap would already be closing around them, and humanity would finally step out of the shadows to claim its place among the stars. The countdown had begun. In less than 2 days, the galaxy would learn that writing off Earth as an empty, primitive world had been the Hegemony's first and final mistake. Part 2, The Awakening the Deep Scanner, arrived aboard a Hegemony transport exactly 47 hours after Dr. Sarah Chen had initiated Operation Rising Dawn. From her position in the Global Defense Command Center, she watched through concealed cameras as alien technicians began assembling the massive device in their base camp. "Ma'am, the scanner will be operational in approximately 6 hours, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. "Once they activate it, they'll detect our underground installations within minutes." Sarah nodded, her finger hovering over the activation switch that would signal every hidden installation on the planet. 8 billion people had waited in darkness for this moment. Now it was time to step into the light. "Send final confirmation to all Continental commands. Execute Rising Dawn in 5 minutes." Across the globe, the response was immediate. In bunkers beneath the Sahara Desert, crews powered up electromagnetic railguns that had been disguised as sand dunes. Under the Amazon rainforest, missile batteries emerged from beneath artificial tree cover. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, submarine platforms rose toward the surface, their hulls bristling with weapons designed specifically for space combat. Colonel Drax was reviewing geological survey data when his communications array exploded in a shower of sparks. Around the Hegemony base camp, Soldiers shouted in alarm as their equipment began failing simultaneously. Energy weapons refused to fire, personal shields flickered and died, and their vehicles ground to a halt as electromagnetic pulse weapons hidden in the surrounding hills discharged in perfect synchronization. "What's happening?" Drax demanded, but his communication system was dead. Every piece of advanced technology the landing force possessed had been rendered useless in less than 30 seconds. Above them, Admiral Korven was experiencing his own crisis. Warning alarms blared across the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, as sensor readings showed energy signatures erupting all across the planet's surface. Massive installations were rising from underground positions, revealing themselves after decades of concealment. "Sir, we're detecting over 200 launch sites activating simultaneously," his tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Energy readings are off the charts." "These aren't primitive weapons, Admiral. This is military-grade hardware." Korven stared at the tactical display as thousands of red dots appeared on the planet's surface. Each dot represented a weapons platform that hadn't existed moments before. The empty world they thought they were colonizing had transformed into a fortress bristling with defensive systems. "How is this possible?" General Thorne whispered. "Our scans showed no technological civilization." "Because we were looking for the wrong things," Korven realized with growing horror. "They hid everything underground. The entire planet is one massive military installation." The first wave of attacks came from the railgun batteries. Projectiles accelerated to incredible velocities by electromagnetic fields punched through space toward the Hegemony fleet. These weren't energy weapons that could be deflected by shields. They were solid slugs of dense metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. The escort frigate Guardian's Pride was the first to die. A tungsten projectile no larger than a beer bottle struck its hull with the force of a small asteroid. The ship's advanced armor, designed to withstand energy weapons and explosive charges, offered no protection against the kinetic impact. The frigate simply disintegrated, its debris spreading across thousands of kilometers of space. "Evasive maneuvers!" Korven shouted. "All ships scatter and prepare for orbital bombardment." But scattering was exactly what the hidden defenders had hoped for. As the Hegemony ships broke formation, they exposed themselves to attacks from multiple directions. Railgun projectiles streaked upward from positions across the planet, forcing the alien vessels to constantly change course to avoid being hit. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet," the communications officer reported. "It's on all frequencies, directed at our entire fleet." "Put it through." The main display flickered to life, showing a human woman in what appeared to be a military uniform. She was sitting in what looked like a command center, with dozens of other humans visible in the background working at various stations. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking for the people of Earth," she said calmly. "You have entered our star system without permission and attempted to colonize our world without consent. We demand that you withdraw immediately." Korven stared at the transmission in disbelief. The planet was inhabited. Not only inhabited, but populated by a species that had somehow managed to hide their entire civilization from Hegemony sensors. "Impossible," he breathed. "Our scans showed no intelligent life." "Your scans showed exactly what we wanted them to show," Dr. Chen replied, somehow hearing his comment. "We've been monitoring your communications since you entered our system. We know about your empire, Admiral Korven. We know about the 800 star systems you've conquered. We know about the billions of innocent beings you've murdered." Thorne leaned toward the communication console. "You're in violation of galactic hegemony law. Surrender immediately or face complete annihilation." Dr. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "General Thorne, isn't it? We've been studying your tactics for years through intercepted communications. You always offer the same choice: submit or die. We're offering you a different option today. Leave now, or discover what happens when you try to conquer a species that's been preparing for this moment for 50 years. Before anyone on the bridge could respond, the second wave of attacks began. This time, it wasn't kinetic weapons, but something far more sophisticated. Beams of coherent energy lanced upward from hidden installations. But these weren't conventional laser weapons. They were quantum disruptors, designed to interfere with the fundamental forces holding matter together. The heavy cruiser Domination's fist found itself caught in one of these beams. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship's hull began to glow as molecular bonds destabilized at the quantum level. Within seconds, the massive warship was falling apart at the atomic level, its crew dying as their own bodies were torn apart by quantum interference. "Shields! Raise all shields!" Korven commanded, but his tactical officer was already shaking his head. "Sir, our shields aren't stopping these weapons. They're designed to deflect energy and matter. But these devices are attacking the basic structure of space-time itself." More ships began dying as the quantum disruptors found their targets. The Hegemony fleet, which had seemed so overwhelmingly powerful just minutes before, was being systematically destroyed by weapons they had never encountered and couldn't defend against. "Admiral," Dr. Chen's voice continued from the speakers, "your technology is impressive, but it's also predictable. You've spent centuries perfecting weapons designed to fight other galactic civilizations using similar technology. You've never faced an opponent that developed along completely different technological paths. On the planet's surface, Colonel Drax and his 50,000 troops found themselves surrounded by enemies that seemed to materialize from thin air. Human soldiers emerged from concealed positions in the hills, from underground tunnels, and from installations that had been completely invisible just moments before. But these weren't the primitive beings the Hegemony had expected to find. The humans were equipped with powered armor that moved like liquid metal, weapons that fired projectiles guided by artificial intelligence, and defensive systems that could deflect the Hegemony's energy weapons with ease. "This is Colonel Drax to Admiral Korven," he transmitted on emergency frequencies. "We are under attack by a highly advanced military force. Request immediate orbital support." Korven wanted to help his ground forces, but his fleet was fighting for its own survival. More railgun projectiles were streaking up from the planet, forcing his ships to maintain constant evasive maneuvers. The quantum disruptors were systematically targeting his largest vessels, and conventional weapons were proving useless against the planet's defensive installations. "Sir," his science officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups at multiple sites across the planet. They're charging something big." On the tactical display, dozens of new signatures appeared as installations that had remained hidden until now began revealing themselves. These were larger than the railgun batteries or quantum disruptors. Much larger. Dr. Chen's image appeared on the screen again. "Admiral, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. If your fleet is still in our system in 1 minute, we will demonstrate why Earth has never been conquered." "You're bluffing," Thorne snarled. "No single planet can threaten a Hegemony battle group." "You're about to learn otherwise," Dr. Chen replied. 20 seconds. Korven found himself facing an impossible decision. The Hegemony had never retreated from a conquest operation. Never. But his fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons he didn't understand, and his ground forces were trapped on a planet that had somehow hidden 8 billion hostile inhabitants. 10 seconds, Dr. Chen announced. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the energy readings from those large installations are reaching critical levels. Whatever they're powering up, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered." 5 seconds. Korven looked around his bridge at the faces of officers who had served with him through dozens of successful conquests. They had never faced defeat because they had never encountered an enemy that could match their firepower. But this wasn't about firepower anymore. This was about facing an opponent that had spent decades preparing specifically to fight them. 4, 3, 2. "All ships retreat to hyperspace," Korven commanded. "Emergency withdrawal." But it was too late. The installations that had been charging across Earth's surface discharged simultaneously, sending focused beams of energy that tore holes in space-time itself. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were devices that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality, creating rifts in space that could trap objects in dimensional pockets. Half the Hegemony fleet simply vanished, caught in spatial distortions that transported them to regions of space millions of light-years away. The remaining ships found their hyperspace drives refusing to function as dimensional anchors held them in normal space. "Hyperspace engines are offline," his engineering officer reported. "Something is interfering with our ability to access higher dimensional space." Dr. Chen's voice filled the bridge one final time. "Admiral Korven, your fleet is now completely at our mercy. Your ground forces are surrounded and disarmed. Your ships cannot escape and cannot effectively fight back. You have one choice remaining: unconditional surrender. The bridge of the Eternal Conquest was silent, except for the hum of failing systems and the distant sounds of explosions, as more Hegemony vessels were destroyed by Earth's defensive grid. Korven stared at the tactical display, watching as the most powerful fleet in galactic history was reduced to scattered wreckage by a species they had dismissed as primitive. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did you hide all of this from our sensors?" "We learned from watching you destroy other civilizations," Dr. Chen replied. "Every species you conquered made the same mistake. They tried to fight you using technology similar to your own. They built bigger ships, more powerful weapons, stronger shields. They competed with you on your terms." The display shifted to show images of Earth's hidden installations, vast underground cities, and weapon systems that had been concealed beneath the planet's surface for decades. "We chose a different path. Instead of trying to build a civilization you would respect, we built one you couldn't see. Instead of developing weapons like yours, we created weapons you couldn't defend against. We turned our entire planet into a trap and waited for you to walk into it." General Thorne stepped forward, his expression desperate. "The Hegemony will send more fleets, thousands of ships. You cannot defeat our entire empire." Dr. Chen smiled again, and this time there was something terrifying in her expression. "General, we've been monitoring your communications for years. We know exactly where your fleets are, what they're doing, and where they're going next. We also know about the weaknesses in your technology, the limitations of your tactics, and the locations of your major shipyards." She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display changed to show star charts marked with hegemony positions across hundreds of light-years. "While you were conquering primitive civilizations, we were building something you never expected. A network of hidden installations on worlds you thought were empty, weapons platforms in systems you considered worthless, and allies among species you dismissed as irrelevant." The implications of her words began to sink in. The hegemony's expansion had been so rapid and so brutal that they had never bothered to thoroughly survey systems that didn't show obvious signs of advanced civilization. If humans had been secretly establishing bases in those systems. "You're not just defending one world," Korven realized. "You've been preparing to fight us across the entire galaxy." "Now you're beginning to understand," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Earth isn't just a planet, Admiral. It's the capital of an interstellar alliance that includes every species your empire has overlooked, every world you considered worthless, and every civilization you thought was too primitive to matter." On cue, new signatures began appearing on the long-range sensors. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace throughout the system, but these weren't hegemony vessels. They were ships of dozens of different designs, representing species that the hegemony had encountered but dismissed as insignificant. "The Centauri mining collectives you ignored because they worked in asteroid belts," Dr. Chen continued. "The nomadic traders you dismissed because they had no fixed homeworld. The deep space research stations you overlooked because they seemed to serve no military purpose. They've all been waiting for this moment." Admiral Korven watched in growing horror as his sensors detected hundreds of ships converging on their position. Each vessel was small compared to hegemony dreadnoughts, but there were so many of them, and they were working in perfect coordination. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No alliance of primitive species could challenge the hegemony." "You're right," Dr. Chen agreed. "No alliance of primitive species could. But we're not primitive, Admiral. We're just different. While you were perfecting the art of destruction, we were perfecting the art of cooperation. While you were building bigger weapons, we were learning to fight smarter." The human fleet that had seemed so modest just hours before was now revealed to be only the tip of an enormous spear. Ships from across the galaxy were arriving to join the battle, each bringing unique technologies and tactics that the hegemony had never encountered. "What do you want?" Korven asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What we want is very simple," Dr. Chen replied. "We want you to stop. No more conquests, no more genocide, no more enslaving civilizations because you have bigger ships and more weapons. The hegemony will never agree to that. Then the hegemony will fall." Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "We've been studying your empire for decades, Admiral. We know about your manufacturing centers, your supply lines, your command structures. We know which worlds are essential to your war machine and which ones are just colonies." She gestured again, and the display showed detailed schematics of hegemony infrastructure across hundreds of star systems. "We can shut down your entire empire within 6 months. Not by destroying it, but by cutting it off from the resources it needs to function. No more raw materials for your shipyards. No more fuel for your fleets. No more communication between your scattered forces." The scope of what she was describing was staggering. The hegemony controlled 800 star systems, but their empire was held together by complex networks of trade, communication, and resource extraction. If those networks were disrupted— "You're talking about economic warfare on a galactic scale," General Thorne said. "We're talking about ending a galactic war," Dr. Chen corrected. "Your empire exists only because smaller civilizations can't coordinate their resistance. You defeat them one at a time, always fighting on your terms. But we've changed the rules." On the surface of Earth, Colonel Drax found himself and his troops being escorted into temporary detention facilities by human soldiers who treated them with surprising courtesy. Their weapons and equipment had been confiscated, but they were being fed, given medical attention, and housed in comfortable quarters. "This isn't how conquests usually go," one of his officers observed. "No," Drax agreed. "Usually we're the ones doing the conquering." A human officer approached, her uniform bearing insignia that Drax didn't recognize. "Colonel Drax? I'm Captain Williams. We'll be processing your soldiers for repatriation to Hegemony space." "Repatriation? We're sending you home," she explained, "along with a complete record of what happened here and our terms for ending this conflict peacefully." Drax stared at her in confusion. "You're not keeping us as prisoners? What would be the point? We're not interested in conquest or revenge, Colonel. We just want the killing to stop." Back on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Korven was still trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. His fleet was defeated, his ground forces were captured, and his entire understanding of galactic politics had been turned upside down. "The terms are simple," Dr. Chen was explaining. "Complete withdrawal of hegemony forces from all contested systems. Establishment of neutral zones between your territory and the systems under our protection. And, most importantly, an end to expansion through military conquest." "The Hegemony Council will never accept those terms," Korven said. "Then they'll discover what happens when 800 star systems suddenly find themselves cut off from each other," Dr. Chen replied. "We have allies positioned to disrupt your supply lines, your communication networks, and your hyperspace routes. Your empire will collapse not from external attack, but from internal starvation." The communication ended, leaving Korven alone with his thoughts and the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Around him, his surviving crew worked frantically to repair damaged systems and tend to wounded comrades. 6 hours later, the remnants of the Hegemony fleet limped away from Earth under human escort. They carried with them complete documentation of everything they had witnessed, detailed recordings of Earth's capabilities, and formal terms for a galactic ceasefire. Behind them, Earth began to transform once again. But instead of hiding, this time humanity was revealing itself in full. Underground cities opened to the surface. Hidden installations became visible research facilities. The planet that had appeared dead to Hegemony sensors was now clearly bustling with 8 billion inhabitants and the most advanced defensive network in known space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center that was no longer hidden, watching as reports arrived from across the galaxy. Human agents and allied species were already moving to implement the economic blockade that would force the hegemony to choose between negotiation and collapse. It had taken 50 years of preparation, but humanity had finally stepped out of the shadows. The species that had hidden to survive was now revealing itself as the guardian of galactic peace, armed with weapons that could stop the most powerful empire in history, and allied with civilizations that the hegemony had never thought to take seriously. The empty world had turned out to be anything but empty, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, the Hegemony Council voted to accept Earth's terms. Faced with the complete breakdown of their supply networks and the coordinated resistance of dozens of previously ignored civilizations, they had no choice but to agree to a ceasefire that would eventually become a permanent peace. Admiral Korven retired from military service and became an advocate for peaceful exploration. Colonel Drax started a cultural exchange program between former enemies. And Dr. Sarah Chen was elected as the first director of the Galactic Peace Initiative, charged with ensuring that no empire would ever again be allowed to conquer the galaxy through fear and superior firepower. The universe had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from hiding or fighting, but from knowing when to step into the light and show the galaxy what true power looks like. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.